Hi everyone, I hope that you are all doing well. This video is a book review about a book that I recently found at the public library, and the title of this book is Living in the Lap of the Goddess, the Feminist Spirituality Movement in America, and it was written by Cynthia Eller. So before I get into this book review and why I chose this book, I wanted to say two things before I start. The first thing is I wanted to say thank you to everyone who wished me a happy birthday. My 36th birthday was at the beginning of this month, and I still haven't checked the birthday wishes on my community wall yet. I've been very busy, but I just wanted to say it in a video. Thank you for all of the wishes. I really appreciated it. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun in Chicago. The second thing I wanted to say is that this video may be spaced out over the course of several days. And the reason that I'm doing it that way is because if you don't notice, a lot of my book reviews have been at nighttime. And the reason that they are at night is because it's really the only time I have for filming. I work during the day, I work all day, even into the night, but my roommate has a job where they work all throughout the night and then the wee hours of the morning. So this is really the only time I'm able to film without feeling like I'm interrupting them, because I don't want to be too loud and wake them up from their sleep. So that's why you are going to see videos being filmed at night. The reason I'm spreading it out over the course of several days is because after working all day, I'm really exhausted, and as late as it gets, I start, getting cloudy thinking, so I'm not able to process my thoughts and opinions in a way of clarity. So if you notice my clothes changing throughout the video, that is why. So those are the two things I wanted to say to you. Now, the reason I chose this book, the first reason was accidental. I was in the religious and spirituality section of the library, and I saw the spine of the book, and I thought that was a very interesting title. So that was the first reason that I selected it, because of the title of the book. But the second reason I decided to choose this book is because I've gotten to this point in my reading journey where I feel that I want to read more books that are either about subjects that I know very little information about, subjects that I wasn't taught in school, or if I was taught them, they were taught in a biased way. So I want to read more up on these subjects to form my own opinion. Another reason is reading this about all sorts of different subjects that I feel I may have an unknown bias about, that I may have a personal bias about that I didn't realize that I have. So it's really to awaken my my awareness when it comes to what I'm reading, and open my mind, or have enough information where I'll be able to have a solid opinion about something. And women's history is something that I honestly have just started getting into, or just started reading about. The reason that I did not have this type of passion before was, number one, I don't think I had enough life experience as a woman that really pushed me to the edge to read more about women and how we live and all of the things that we go through and what we've done historically. I also want to place emphasis on how I was educated. Where I went to school was a very religious school. It was a non-denominational, I guess you could call it fundamentalist Christian school and church. And even though I am a woman, I feel like the the contributions of women in my education were not emphasized. It actually seemed unspoken, as if women were just second class, or what they did really wasn't that important, not important enough to mention, not important enough to focus on. The first time that I came across any subject related to women was in my freshman year of college when I went to art school. And one of my classmates mentioned something about feminism. That was the first time I had ever heard of feminism. I didn't know what feminism was. Whatever she said, I don't know how she described it was basically mocking feminism. And at that point, I really didn't understand what it was. And what's interesting is the girl that said that, she is trans now. So I I almost want to ask him or them how they feel about feminists. Like, I want to write them because we're Facebook friends, but I want to see how their life experience has changed how they view women's studies, women's history, and all of that. So yes, as I said, I don't think I had enough life experience to really understand. The first person that I met that truly had a passion for women's history was a professor in my second college when I took a women's studies course. And this woman was so passionate about learning about women and their recipes and their contributions, and it really left an impression on me that I never forgot. So even though it has been years since that class, every time I think of women's studies, I see her face and how passionate she was about her subject matter that she taught. So this book was so heavy, I don't even know how to start. I honestly, it was very detailed. It was very long. Well, not really, it wasn't that long, but it was almost 300 pages, but chock full of information. And I can't wait to share with you all of the things that stood out in my mind as I was reading it. But before I get into the book review, let me share with you a little bit about the author, Cynthia Eller. Now, I am on her LinkedIn because she has a website, but it didn't really have a bio like that. So I just am using her LinkedIn. So Cynthia Eller, she has a background in research, editing, and writing. She's also a science writer for the Caltech website. So it's the California Institute of Technology. I don't know if this LinkedIn is up to date, but as of now, it says that she's been a writer for Caltech since May of 2023. She also was a professor at Claremont Graduate University for 3 years. She was a general editor for 3 years at the American Academy of Religion. She was also full-time editor of Reading Religion. She was a professor for 13 years at Montclair State University. She was a tenured professor of religious studies and women's studies. Her education, she received a graduate certificate in book conservation from Westing College from September 2021 to July 2022. It was a one-year training course in all aspects of book conservation, including binding and rebinding. She also has her MLS, which is Masters of Library Science, from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So this woman is a very, very educated woman. She has a couple of books as well. I don't see it on her LinkedIn, so we're going to go to her website and look at her books. It says Cynthia Eller, Religious Studies, Gender Studies, and more. And let's see. In her website, it lists the articles that she wrote, the features on Caltech, textbooks. Okay, this looks like textbooks for her class, but here's some books that she wrote. There's Gentlemen and Amazons, Am I a Woman?, The Myth of the Matriarchal Prehistory, and the Conscientious Objectors in the Second World War, Moral and Religious Arguments in Support of Pacifism. And then also this book, Living in the Lap of the Goddess. This book, I don't know if she's created a second edition, but it was written in or published in 1993 by the Crossroad Publishing Company. So it is technically over 30 years old, like 32 years old. Some of the book's points are, some of the parts of the books I feel are outdated, but then there's others that are still relevant to this day. And I personally feel she did not have enough diversity as far as the women that she interviewed. And if she does have a second edition, I feel that she should expand the types of women that she interviews. But before I get into that, let us talk a little bit about the preface, because the preface would explain it better than me. Hi everyone. It is a completely different day. There were two things that I wanted to share with you before I go into the preface. The first thing is I found the textbook that I had for my women's studies class back in college. I kept it all these years. And this is the textbook. I haven't read it through its entirety, but it's called Through Women's Eyes, An American History with Documents, and it's by Ellen Carroll Dubois and Lynn Dumenil. So I'm going to start reading through this book just to, get a refresh of women's studies. The second thing that I wanted to share with you is that I think when I have books that have a lot of information or a heavy subject matter, I'm going to start printing off discussion questions so that way I can have some semblance of order. Sometimes when I have a very lengthy book, for me, it's hard to know where to start or what flow to go through. So I generated these discussion questions online, and if you want me to share them with you, you can tell me if you want them posted in the comments below or if you want them posted on the community wall. As I read through this book, I'm gonna, pick and choose a couple of the questions to go over. So now with the preface. The preface starts off like this. The feminist spirituality movement is one of the most fascinating religious phenomena of the past 20 years, with roots and branches in many places, including neo-paganism, political feminism, Jewish and Christian feminism, the New Age, and Native American spiritualities. Feminist spirituality has nevertheless emerged as a sociological entity in its own right, too large and too distinct to be adequately understood as a subphenomenon of any other religious or social movement. I agree with this. Whenever I interact with spiritual feminists, I honestly don't know what type of spiritual feminists I'm getting, because there's so many nuances with all of them. I've met spiritual feminists who are also in the LGBTQ plus community, and that's interwoven into their feminism. I've seen spiritual feminists that are attached to a belief system, and somehow they find feminism within their belief system, whether it's an Abrahamic belief system or not. I've met ones that are into, let's see, like I met this woman back not too long after I stopped working for the library. This lady worked in the library, and she was the only worker I knew of that was involved in Wicca. And she was the first Wiccan I met that only focused on women. I think she may have been Dianic Wiccan, but I don't know if Dianic Wiccan has some sects, or like sects of them that have men, but a lot of them have women only covens. But she was the first Wiccan feminist that I met. So as you can see, there are so many varieties in all of these different groups. You might have one that is like, oh, I only focus on moms, or I focus on my orientation, or I am this and that, and it's going to fall under the umbrella. That's why it's so large, because you're never going to get the same spiritual feminist. Then she says that her interviewees were not selected to form a statistically accurate sampling of spiritual feminists, but rather to ensure variety, particularly in terms of these women's levels of participation in the movement. I disagree. I do not think there was variety. In addition to speaking personally with women for whom feminist spirituality has been an integral part of their lives for many years, I spoke with women who were more peripheral or new to the movement to see how a more nominal identification as a spiritual feminist functioned in their lives. Contacts with interviewees were made mostly by referral from other spiritual feminists whom I met through my research and my participation at spiritual feminist gatherings. I conducted the remaining interviews myself. All but 2 interviews took place in the Northeast owing to financial constraints, but many of the women interviewed have moved around the country extensively, so geographical diversity is thereby included in the sample. The sample is overwhelmingly Caucasian and of the baby boom generation, as is the movement generally. So, right, the baby boom generation, I still feel is relevant. As you know, this book was written in the early 90s. This was published in the early 90s. So I don't know if that's still a fact for now, or if it's going to be their descendants as far as age-wise. But the overwhelmingly Caucasian part, I feel that was by choice. I know she said financial constraints, and I'm not trying to point fingers at her or blame her, but I feel that you could have gotten more diversity as far as the types of women that you interviewed. It can't be overwhelmingly Caucasian and overwhelmingly baby boomer and still be and say this is diversity. That's not diversity to me, honestly. I'm thinking to myself, you couldn't have found a black woman that was into hoodoo, voodoo, African traditional religion. You couldn't have found an Asian woman that was into, like, no, I guess with the Asian, I can't even, that's just so diverse. I don't even want to go into all that. You couldn't have found an Asian woman that focused on her spiritual practices. You couldn't have found a Native American woman, or a Latina or something. I don't get it. I'm not saying Latina is a race or anything, but you couldn't have found any of them. You could have gone to New Orleans and gotten somebody into voodoo or hoodoo or something. Like, why was it overwhelmingly Caucasian? But then at the same time, she said that she found women at festivals. And now that I think about it, when I had to sit down and really think this through, even some of the literature, some of the magazines that I see now, it's still overwhelmingly Caucasian. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, if you're talking about diversity, I don't really think that's the diversity you're trying to get. Now with Caucasian women, there is diversity with them within that sect. But if you're talking about spirituality, a goddess, I expect to see all of her different forms with all of her different children. Even the cover of this book is like, you're not talking to me. You're only talking to one group of women. I feel this cover should be redone. It should have the goddess in all of her forms on the cover, whether she's Oshun or Yemaya or Kuan Yin or Bridget or whatever, Green Tara. Put her forms on the front of this book. When I see this, I just see one aspect of the goddess. I don't see all of her different forms, and I feel like I'm not the target audience. There's some things in literature and books where I know who the target audience is. Women, okay, I'm a woman. If it said black women, I'd be like, okay, black women. If it said somebody like, oh, Latina women, I'm not Latina, so I'm not the target audience. So I'm not going to be upset or anything that you didn't mention me or whatever. I mean, you might mention your interactions with me, but I'm not going to be upset because I'm not the target audience. But some things, if they're global, I feel everyone should be represented. You say goddess is not just one form. Goddess is a branch, is an umbrella with all of the rainbows of her children. So I feel she kind of dropped the ball there. And even in chapter 2, where she says a sociological profile of the feminist spirituality movement. The sociological profile of the feminist spirituality movement can be summed up like this: white, of middle-class origins, fairly well educated beyond high school, of Jewish or Christian background, usually though not always, having had a significant amount of religious training, in their 30s or 40s, and disproportionately lesbian. There are many women who are exceptions to one or more, or all of these rules, but most approximate to this profile. I kind of half agree with that. I only half agree, because I have met this sociological profile. I've met this. Like most of the white women that I've met in feminist spirituality, they actually fit this profile. But that's if you're just interviewing them. There's other women that are in existence. So if I was to say like a black woman, because I don't have a lot of groups like that are Afro Latina or white Latina. Like I don't have that much interaction with that group. So where I'm at now in St. Louis, the perspective I'm coming from is Black woman with my experiences in the Black community and the white community. Black community, spirituality, they could fit this profile because I have met a lot of Black women that were of, they might have been not Jewish, but maybe like Israelite, Christian background, of course. Some of them are not, a lot of them are heterosexual, but some of them, there's more bisexual than lesbian that I've met. All sorts of demographics, like all sorts of financial status. Even, I guess this is what it was like for the time of this interview. Because she talks about these retreats. How many of the women that were having financial constraints going to these retreats, did they even know about these retreats? Did they even know about these magazines? It's almost as if you had to have the money, to have the leisure time to pursue all of this. But let's see what she says about this. To expand on the profile in terms of age distribution, most spiritual feminists are members of the baby boom generation, meaning their late 20s or mid-40s. If feminist spirituality were equally attractive to women aged 0 to 100, there would still be a disproportionate number of women in their 30s and 40s, because there are more women in this age group in the general population. However, at both large festivals and smaller rituals, it is impressive to note how few women there are below 30 and how many there are 50 and older. There is a great deal more variation in age than there is in race. In all my travels through this feminist spirituality movement, I believe I can still count on my fingers and toes the total number of women I have seen who are not obviously Caucasian. There are women of color in the feminist spirituality movement, and certainly one finds their writings included in the movement's journals. However, judging from the amount of concern voiced in feminist spirituality publications about the lack of women of color in the movement and the quest for ways to bring them in, it is clear that the overwhelming whiteness of the movement is not in serious question. If anything, observation suggests that Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native American spiritual feminists are either not very numerous or are sharing their spirituality together without the white community. I think the second half is the more accurate one. They are numerous. They're just doing their own thing. And I first noticed this when I started going to the Pagan Picnic in St. Louis. Well, that's where I am now. But every year in June, there's a Pagan Picnic. It's in Tower Grove Park. And it's just a metaphysical picnic. You have crystals, you have dancing, and mostly what I've seen there is it's predominantly white, predominantly LGBTQ. However, as the years have passed, I've actually started noticing more diversity. This year was probably the most diverse I've ever seen it. It had people of all races, it had people of all orientations there. It was way more diverse than when I started going. Whereas the community I'm in, the Black community, when we do, at least in St. Louis, I don't know how they do it in other places. When we do our thing, it's just like you'll go there and we'll be the only ones there. Like you might have one white person or one Asian person, but it's mostly Black. And we're just doing our own thing. It's like the two communities are separated from each other. And I don't know if it's because there's a distrust or there's not really an interaction or it just might be different. So I'm glad that she mentioned this in there in her book because it's still going on. I feel if she did write another edition of this book, it may turn out different. She might be able to interview more people Then she says, this is not a fact about which white spiritual feminists are very happy. It is at odds with their dream of feminist spirituality that brings together women of every race and nationality. Most spiritual feminists understand themselves to be first women, and only later down the line as people with red hair or from a Catholic background, as New Englanders or pet store owners, as tall people or fat people, or libertarians or Democrats. This primary identification as female is key to the very existence of the feminist spirituality movement, a religion for women. I feel how this movement will survive is just accepting that people are different and they don't have to change, but you can come together. And I know that kind of goes against what I was saying earlier, like, why won't we all just combine? I feel the reason a lot of people don't combine is they feel they have to be forced or altered to change. And there's also a history of distrust between a lot of the groups. So personally, how I feel one way that would work is just let people be. We need to just start acting like cats. We just do our own thing. We come and we go. Which leads me to my first discussion question, which was, how does feminist spirituality differ from and or challenge traditional patriarchal religions? Growing up in a patriarchal religion, and I'm just going to say this from personal experience, sometimes in my upbringing in a religious school, I just felt like, why did we ruin the world? Like, that's how I felt as a child, reading the Genesis story, and if Eve hadn't eaten the piece of fruit, then none of this would have been blah, 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 blah. I actually still meet people to this day who talk trash about Eve. In fact, a few days ago, I ran into this older guy that I see every once in a while. He's an older white guy. I thought he was Jewish, but I think he's Jehovah's Witness. He's Jehovah's Witness. And we have good conversations, but one thing that he said 3 or 4 days ago, he said, do you know why women have pain during childbirth? It's because of Eve. It's because she ate that apple. I feel like with patriarchal belief systems, there's a rigid structure, and you have to follow the confines of that structure, or else you will be punished or ostracized. Whereas with feminist spirituality, it's like water, you can flow free. Now, if I were a person that was obsessed with patriarchy, or not patriarchy, a patriarchal belief system, I wouldn't like this free-flowing thing, you know? It would seem as if it's chaotic and disorderly and not of God. It would seem like a sin. It would feel as if I'm just going to fall into immorality and debauchery. Now, a lot of women that came to spiritual feminism from the church, what I noticed in some of the stories in here, the first person accounts, some of them felt they did not see themselves in the religion of patriarchy. They had this fear of the Old Testament God. They saw him as not somebody they wanted to associate with. They felt they were not being represented in their religious book, whether it was the Bible or elements of Judaism. Well, I guess that'd be like part of the Bible. I almost said the Torah, but the Torah is incorporated into the Bible. But anyway, as I was saying, they felt more mercy when they transition over to feminist spirituality instead of staying in the patriarchal religion. And a patriarchal religion, usually if it's like Christianity, you have these rules that you have to follow. If you don't obey, you'll be sent to eternal damnation. You'll be sent to hellfire. They monitor how you dress. Some of them, depending on where you are, you can't cut your hair. Some of them, you can't wear your skirt above your knee. You can't do this. You can't use your body this way. You can't do this to your body. You cannot be a leader in the church. It's always the can'ts. And it feels suffocating and oppressive for some women. Now, there are women that feel liberated within a patriarchal belief system. I guess they come from the perspective of, it is my duty as a woman to do this according to the rules of this patriarchal belief system. So, yeah, like feminist spirituality, I feel is more catered to the individual. If you're a woman that likes to dance, you can incorporate that into your spirituality. If you're a woman that likes to create altars, you can do that in your feminist spirituality. If you're in a patriarchal belief system, you'd have to only create an altar to your patriarchal God most of the time. With feminist spirituality, there's more room for interpretation. On average, there is no right or wrong way of doing something. It's what you feel in your soul. So that's my personal opinion of the differences. It says, what role does ritual, myth, and magic play in the lives of spiritual feminists? Another thing I noticed in this book are the women that were part of a patriarchal belief system, especially if it was Catholicism. Maybe one or two of them talked about liking the rituals because they were ritualistic people anyway. It got them into the mindset of worship. There was a chapter in here. I don't know how to feel about this chapter, but it was called The Rise and Fall of Women's Power. And it talks about ancient matriarchies, the mythological or mythology of ancient matriarchies. Let's see. The story of feminist spirituality's sacred history begins in ancient times too ancient to be recorded in written language. Most spiritual feminists assume that goddess worship began with the first human societies, of which we have no records whatsoever. But since they cannot begin to prove anything about the religious or social practices of culture that have left nothing but bones, spiritual feminists usually date ancient matriarchies back to the first archaeological evidence they can find for goddess worship. Let's see. How does the political sphere intersect with their religious practices? There was a chapter in here that was talking about how the spiritual feminists tried to merge with the political feminists, and it was a challenge. Hi everyone. This is day number 3 of this book review, and hopefully I can finish it tonight. Where we left off was I asked the question, how does feminist spirituality differ from and or challenge traditional patriarchal religions? Now the question from here is answered in this book in various chapters in a number of ways, but I'm going to share with you some of my personal experiences of why I think there's a difference. Growing up in the church as a girl into a woman, I can see why women would flock to something like feminist spirituality. In feminist spirituality, woman is celebrated, not because she obeyed somebody or because she had to sacrifice something, but essentially celebrating her power, the natural things that her body can do, all of her phases, like the mother, the maiden, and the crone. When you take something like, let's say, the Bible, and they're talking about women, in some chapters, you'll have somewhat of a celebration of women. I hear a lot of Christian women quoting Proverbs 31. Even though that woman had her own businesses and everything, she really wasn't a subservient woman. But most of the other stories are like, she has to have all of these children. She has to be obedient to her husband. Her menstrual cycle is cursed. Her pain in childbirth is cursed. The mother's or the woman's natural bodily functions and natural desires are punished or cursed or criticized within a patriarchal religion. In a patriarchal belief system, often the woman is utilized for either her physical labor, she has to run the household, she has to obey her husband or whatnot, or they're using her for her body. She has to birth all of these children, she has to rear these kids, she has to quit everything and become a mother, even if she didn't want to be a mother. And if she has a hard time giving birth or getting pregnant, then she's seen as cursed. You see that in I can't remember which chapter of the Bible it was in, but Hannah's prayer, where Hannah was crying because she couldn't have a child, and she felt like she wasn't a complete woman until she had a child. So in a patriarchal belief system, a woman is usually giving up something, whereas in a feminist spirituality belief system, the woman comes as she is. And as she changes, her changes are celebrated. And it's crazy because sometimes I forget that people will think about women in a very archaic mindset. I remember recently there's this older man that I run into sometimes. I thought he was a Jewish man. I thought he was Jewish, but he was actually Jehovah's Witness. Most of the Jehovah's Witnesses I know are black people, like black women or black couples, but he was the first white Jehovah's Witness I met. And every time we have a discussion, he's always asking about, what do I think about women in this? What do I think about women in that? And it always goes back to, Eve shouldn't have eaten that apple. You see how the world looks because Eve ate that fruit. See, that's why you have pain in childbirth. That's why this is happening, because Eve ate the fruit. Like, just pointing the fingers, blaming the woman. And I mean, I don't take it personally because I know myself, and nothing that this man says or whatever can harm me. If somebody tells me a woman can't be a leader in the church or whatnot, even though I don't go to church, I don't take any offense to it because I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And if you don't like what I say, then that's your problem, because in your belief system, your God can use any mouthpiece that it wants. In fact, in one of the Bible stories, God used a donkey to get a message across. So I don't know why you can't accept a woman being in leadership. But some of these stories in here, they have a common ground. They have similarities with each other. In chapter 2, she says, religious experiences in childhood. A prominent theme in spiritual feminist conversion stories is the way that feminist spirituality provides a link to childhood religious experiences. What spiritual feminists come home to is a spirituality they knew as children, one which was disparaged by traditional religions and then stripped away by years in the adult world. Though it has its own unique characteristics, Joan Maddox's story could serve as the prototype for conversion to feminist spirituality. So, basically, the synopsis of the feminist spirituality conversion stories, it's usually a woman is in a patriarchal belief system. She wants something more. She stumbles upon something or discovers the goddess, and then she converts to feminist spirituality. Even though there really is no conversion, it's just something that you come into. In fact, she mentions that on page 24. She says, "It is important to stress that not all religions regard conversion in this light." No, this was something she mentioned earlier. Christian fundamentalist sects, for example, often specialize in conversion stories whose model is the 180-degree turn. If one cannot stand up and tell a good story with the basic form, I started out bad, tainted with sin. I got worse. I wallowed in sin. Just when I hit bottom, drowning in sin, Jesus saved me. Then the authenticity of one's conversion is in doubt. In contrast, spiritual feminist conversions have this form. I started out different, special, keenly aware of truths that people around me neglected or denied. I tried traditional religions, but rejected them as sexist. I explored different spiritual practices, trying to quench my spiritual thirst. I finally found feminist spirituality, and I knew I had come home. I knew I had found something big enough to encompass everything I need. If the metaphors for fundamentalist Christians are being saved and being filled with the love of the Lord, the metaphors for spiritual feminists are coming home and finding myself. For these women, the language of feminist spirituality may be new, but the experiences are old and familiar. I vibe with that. When I was in church and in a church school, I actually had a hard time following some of the rules. It just didn't feel good to me. It felt like, was there anything I could do that wouldn't send me to hell? Because my church was very big on emphasizing on hellfire and rapture. And so a lot of my childhood was plagued with terror of being left behind with the rapture and all of that. And I was also very conscientious of what I could wear, what I could not wear. I still have issues with the clothes I wear to this day in the back of my mind because it was drilled in my head as a child. You can't wear that. This is immodest. You can't do that. You can't do this with your body. You can't do that with your body. It's immoral. It's immodest. And it just felt like, because I was born as a woman, there was just nothing I could do right. And this really didn't, well, I guess it didn't fully solidify my mind as a child, but as I became a woman living in the real world, it just got harder and harder. It's like the older I got as a woman, the harder it became for me. Not in church, just in general. And sometimes I just wanted to be like, is there any mercy anywhere? So I see why women would choose spiritual feminism, because let's say somebody had some case of abuse or something, and they get gaslit by their religious community or the church that they're in. So they find their mercy or their solace or their comfort in spiritual spiritual feminism, if that makes any sense. Now, in some belief systems, like Catholicism, that's one of the few belief systems where the woman, I guess the Virgin Mary, would have a place of honor. So some women that were in Catholicism that left it for feminist spirituality talk about having an affinity for the Virgin Mary, which I can understand because that's probably the only representation that you have in that church. Next thing. How does the political sphere intersect with their religious practices? There was a part in this book, I don't know which chapter it was, where she was talking about how feminism, it was chapter 9, Feminist Politics and Feminist Spirituality, 185. Now, this chapter was interesting to me because I'm not well versed in politics. I don't know much about politics. I didn't even know there was a problem between political feminists and spiritual feminists until I read this author's book. I didn't know that there was a problem. Maybe back then it was an issue, but maybe in this modern age, perhaps it's become integrated. I don't know. So, from the time feminist spirituality first emerged on the American cultural scene, it has been charged with abandoning a feminist social conscience in favor of a mindless, feel-good spirituality. It has, says its critics, sliced off its political roots and descended into the airy heavens where oppression is meaningless and women never have to run for president. Many religions, both traditional and alternative, would take such a charge in stride. Why care about politics, they say. We are interested in people's souls and in the nature and destiny of the universe. Why divert ourselves from such weighty topics with the frivolity of politics? Now, when I read that part, it just opened up a new door for me because I didn't even know this was an issue, but now I can see why it was an issue. Because up until I read that, I was a little bit confused. I was like, okay, like, aren't they? They're all feminists. What is the problem? So what the issue was the political feminists wanted to focus on the here and now, on the earth plane, doing change through law, protesting, and everything. The spiritual feminists wanted, I guess, to do the same thing but in a different way. They wanted to do it through their own individuality, maybe doing magic or trying to empower women on a personal level. But the common ground, she mentions this in, I don't know if it was this chapter or another chapter, but a lot of those spiritual feminists started focusing more on the environment because the environment represented the Mother Earth, who is the mother of us all. So it felt more in alignment with their belief systems, especially if they were a nature-based belief system of feminist spirituality. But eventually the two groups kind of merged. I mean, right now in this this time period, from what I've seen of spiritual feminists, if it's a and I mentioned this earlier about the different groups where it's like this race of spiritual feminists, that race of spiritual feminists. With the Black spiritual feminists that I've seen as far as politics, a lot of their politics are focused on the Black community, and also women's, let me see. I'm trying to think of what to call it. Basically, doulas, midwifery, making sure that Black women stay alive after they give birth. Decreasing the mortality rate of Black women during childbirth, making sure that our civil rights are still intact, and shining a light on brutality and Black femicide and all those different things. That's what I've seen with Black spiritual feminists. With white spiritual feminists, what I have seen is, I mean, some of them will focus on stuff like Black Lives Matter and stuff, but a lot of them are more into protesting against war, LGBTQ plus rights, and reproductive rights. I mean, the Black spiritual feminists will focus on reproductive rights as well, but they have their own sect where it's specifically women of color and Black women and their reproductive rights, because it's as it should be, because we are not treated the same. I'm sorry, I just had to say it. But yeah, I think now there is more of a merge or a blend now than there was in the past. So that's why I really feel this author should write another edition of this book with some updated interviews. Let us see. What other things? What are the core beliefs and practices of the goddess movement as described by Eller? There is not just one chapter that will describe that, but some of the women, from what I've read in this book, some of the women will have very elaborate practices. They'll be in covens. They would be doing their rituals at home. Some of them would even make up their own goddesses or own deities. There was a part where it talked about who is the goddess, who is she? And I don't see it, but it's like, what is the goddess? Is the goddess polytheistic? Is the goddess from monotheism? This is on page 132. And it's from chapter 7 called Not Just God in a Skirt. Who is the goddess? Monotheism and polytheism. One very real difficulty in writing about feminist spirituality is deciding whether to use the singular or the plural in the referring to the divine. Most spiritual feminists use both, depending on the context. Among the more common responses to the interview questions, "Do you believe in a goddess?" was the reply, "A goddess? I believe in many goddesses." But in subsequent discussion, the phrase "the goddess" would continue to come up with regularity. Clearly, both the goddess and many goddesses are realities for most spiritual feminists, and the domain of the divine expands even further than this. Yeah, but It says, if the idea of a single great goddess has lasting appeal for spiritual feminists, the concepts of many goddesses proves nearly as irresistible. And she also explains how a lot of them feel that the goddess is outside of them and within them, which I also agree, because if you are a woman, you are an aspect of the goddess. That's why when people talk about, oh, I want a woman that's feminine, and I'm just like, which feminine are you talking about? Are you talking about I'm riding on a tiger with 1,000 swords? Are you talking about I am a woman whose face you can't see and I have childbearing hips? Like, which one is it? I don't know. It's so diverse. But the goddess is the movement's most powerful symbol for nature. For many women, in fact, the goddess is not a symbol for nature, but it is nature. I remember there was a customer at one of my jobs, and I overheard her talking to another customer, and she said, you have to put your feet on the earth because she is Gaia. It's not the earth. She has a name, and her name is Gaia. I was like, okay, I like that. I like that. That was the first, I mean, I already known the name Gaia, but that was the first time I heard somebody say her name is Gaia for the earth. The goddess and the women who relate to her. Belief in the goddess. In seeking to understand the relationship of spiritual feminists to their goddess, the Orthodox Judeo-Christian model of human relationship to God is of little help. Jews, and even more so Christians, tend to speak of God wanting humans to believe in Him and express that belief in worship and praise. Whereas, like with a goddess, you don't have to believe in the goddess because you are her. Somebody said in here, believe in her. No, I experience her. I agree with that too. But I feel like this video is getting a little bit longer, so I wanted to end because there's just too many topics. This would have to be like this would have to be a whole series. But I wanted to end this video with the interview questions that the author asked the women, and I also wanted to answer some of them for myself. Hey everyone, this is the final part of my video, and in this part I'm going to share with you the interview guide that the author used when she interviewed the women in this book. It is in a section called Appendix B, and it says Interview Guide. I'm not going to answer all of the questions, but I will share with you the questions that she asked. And if there is a question that I want to answer or I'm unsure of what my answer is, I will just say, I do not know. So the first section of the interview guide is background, and the questions are birth date, birthplace, education, profession, religious background. How did you become involved in feminist spirituality? Books, journals, newsletters, groups, covens, classes, workshops, friends, mentors. To what extent are each of the above important to your current practices? Have you had any other religious affiliations? Do you have any other current religious affiliations and/or spiritual personal growth affiliations? Are you currently in a feminist spirituality group? And how long has this group been together if you are? So my answers for these questions are, I was born in August. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. My education is, I have a bachelor's in English and visual arts. My profession, that's kind of expansive. I would say primarily I'm a visual artist, but I do not make money off of my art like that. I'm not a full-time artist. I have a blend of different skills that I use in order to survive in this world, which include like my jobs, which are usually related to the skills that, or my interests. Like both of my jobs are related to my interests. Religious background. I grew up in the Christian church. I was non-denominational Christian. How did you become involved in feminist spirituality? Mine was not just one thing, it was actually a blend of things. They were a mixture of the books that I've read about goddesses and religions, the influence of my old best friend, because she was into spirituality too, my associations with women who were focused on uplifting other women. If I hadn't associated with those women, I probably would not have had any concern about women's anything. Not saying that I didn't care, it was just something that wasn't on my mind until somebody pointed it out. And I really blame that on my upbringing in a religious school where women's needs and women's rights were considered secondary. Another thing that influenced my spirituality is just my experience as a woman, the trials that I've been through as a woman, where I want to depend on someone or have some type of understanding, and there would be nobody there. So I basically fell deeper into the feminist spirituality because that's the only place I found some modicum of understanding and mercy. Let's see. To what extent are each of the above important to your current practices? Books are probably the top notch tier of importance because books will expose me to different ideas, and without the pressure of a group, I can decide what I will keep and what I will not keep. Just looking at the information and making up my own mind about it makes me feel empowered, and that really fuels my spirituality, but also my encounters with women as well. And these women don't have to be spiritual. Some of them are very, very religious. Some of them are not religious at all, but associating with them helps me feel as if I'm fulfilling some type of mission, because there's a lot of women that I've communicated with who were either trapped in relationships that were toxic, or they were suffering in some type of way, or they needed to hear a message to move forward in their life. And it inspired me to focus more on wisdom, so if I did meet women like that, I would be able to give them the wisdom that they needed. So working with them has helped me stay accountable to the work that I'm doing for myself. Are you currently in a feminist spirituality group? No, I'm not in any group. You will never see me in any group. I don't really believe in groups because I don't trust them. The reason I don't trust them is because I've had very bad experiences with groups. Now, I could see a group that I like, and I could get along with people on an individual basis or level, but when it comes to a group, I'm kind of leery of them just from what I have experienced. I've seen groups that are low-key scammers. I have seen groups where the women are suffering from physical mistreatment and emotional mistreatment. I've seen other groups where they're trying to usher you into some polygamous cult or take your money, or they would be using their spirituality to basically harm people. I mean, if the person did something to you that was bad, like they were threatening your life or something, okay, then I could see. But you're just hating on somebody you don't even know. That's why I don't join any groups, because some of them are just full of lies. And I'm not saying that each individual in the group is full of lies, because some people are in very evil groups and they don't even realize that's where they are. So that's why I don't join any groups. Beliefs. So the questions for the section of beliefs is, do you believe in a goddess? If so, what is she like? Is it pantheism, monotheism, polytheism, animism, triple goddess? Does the goddess have male aspects? Do you worship a god? Why is it significant that the goddess is female? Is the goddess capable of controlling historical events? Does she? Does the goddess exist for those who don't believe in her or recognize her? Do you see the earth as living, as female? Why? How does this connect to belief or lack thereof in goddess? Do you believe there was ancient goddess worship? What were goddess worshipping societies like for men or for women? Why is their existence significant to you? Where does the patriarchy come from? How long has it been around? Why did it arise? What are its principal characteristics? When will it end? How will it end? And what will replace it? Are women more spiritual than men? In what way? Why? Is there a connection between women's spirituality and sexuality? What is it? Do you see feminist spirituality as being incompatible with Judaism or Christianity, Eastern religions? If so, how? If not, why not? So, do I believe in a goddess? I do. If so, what is she like? I feel that definition is going to change wherever the woman's mindset is. I don't really like limiting the concept of goddess, because I believe a goddess is inside of you and it is outside of you and it is of the earth as well. So when I say the goddess is, hold on. Okay. So this also goes with the questions. Does the goddess exist even for those who don't believe in or recognize her? I think it does, because since with my personal belief system, I believe that the goddess is within you. If you see a woman, or if you have a woman in your life, you're basically looking at a goddess. Even if you were an atheist, or you were of a patriarchal religion, you would still be dealing with some type of aspect of the goddess, because you have a woman in your life. You came through a woman, and that is why you are here. Let's see. But yeah, I believe that the goddess is within me and outside of me. There's also a small element of my belief where the goddess may be metaphorical, where it's just a concept and we've created archetypes or human-like figures of this concept of the goddess. That's one aspect that I believe. I also believe that perhaps the goddess could be an egregore, which is the collective consciousness of people create a thought form that gains its own consciousness. So maybe some of the goddesses were just a concept and it gained its own consciousness and became an actual thing. Another thing I believe is perhaps the goddess is a series of entities that came from another realm. So I'm open to any interpretation, or all of them could be true for me. I really don't care. I just know that it is there, or she is there. Does the goddess have male aspects? I think the goddess would have male aspects, because men and women come from women. We give birth to men and women. So, of course, we'll have a part of them in us. I'm not saying that it's bad. I just think the goddess embodies everyone and everything. Do you worship a god? It depends. Like, what, I don't understand if she means like a god as in like a Yahweh or Rama, or I I guess maybe. Why is it significant that the goddess is female? I think it's significant because that the goddess is female because women, like I say, women are the portal between the unborn and this realm. The only reason we are here is because either a woman was forced to bring us here or she decided to bring us here. If she didn't want you here, if she had the choice or whatever, you would not be here. You are literally at the mercy of this woman. She decides whether or not humanity continues on. You can come, well, how was I? You can plant your seed in her all you freaking want, but that doesn't mean she's going to grow the harvest for you. And when a woman is born, or when you are born, there's only two ways you get into this planet. Either you were pushed out of a woman or you were cut out of a woman. Those are the only two ways you can come into this realm. You cannot come any other way. So I would count that as something where it is godlike, it is like a deity, that would be kind of scary, that you are at the mercy of someone like that. And when you're born, the scent on your fingers is basically like the scent on her nipple. That's why babies will like try to crawl to find food. You literally grew inside of her for whatever amount of time you stayed, because some people are preemies and stuff, so they don't stay in her womb that long. But whatever she eats, you eat. Whatever she thinks affects you. Whatever medication she's doing affects you too. You came out of her, and the first thing you do when you're born is you look for her or you try to hear her voice. And also another thing, a lot of places would go through the matrilineal line. Why? Because I could get pregnant, but who is the daddy? It could be him. It could be him. I don't know. Who could it be? You don't know either. The only way you would know is if you got a test to see if that was that man's baby. Because even if the baby looked like him, it doesn't mean it's his baby. But I saw this baby come out of the woman, so that's her baby. I know where it came from because I saw it. Or I saw the markings that she had a baby. So that's what I believe in. Why is it significant that the goddess is female? Because she represents reproduction, she represents life, she represents the cycles of life and death. Let's see. Is the goddess capable of controlling historical events? Does she? I say yes, but it doesn't mean that she will all of the time. I also have a belief in parallel universes. You have options. You could either do this or you could do that. If you choose this path, all of these things could possibly happen. If you choose that path, all of these things could possibly happen. It's like a computer. You have choices. But then sometimes the universe will take hold of things because you're not learning your lesson. You can only tell a little child, don't touch the stove, so many times until the child's hand gets burnt. And once that child's hand gets burnt, then they learn the lesson. Do you think they're going to do that stuff again? No, they're not, unless they're crazy, because they remember the pain. So sometimes the universe will let you go through pain because you didn't listen to the prior warnings. Like, it's like, hey, don't do that. You're like, I'm going to do what I want. It's like, no, you need to just chill. No, I'm just going to do what I want. Ha ha ha, I'm touching the stove. Now you get burnt. Now you're crying. So yes, I think sometimes the goddess will have all of this crazy stuff
being allowed to happen because you just not listening. You messing up the earth. It's like, okay, I'm going to send a flood. I'm going to send a volcano. I'm going to send some meteorites. All I asked for you was to take care of me, and you over here just digging and digging and digging. So we have choices. We do. We can always change if we want to. We can bring karma on ourselves, good or negative karma, if we decide to. We can always change our ways. It's never too late to change. But do you see the earth as living? Yes. As female, I do. I do see the earth as female. Why? Basically the same reason for like we had to come through the woman to get to the earth. And then we're searching for her. I feel like how we relate to the earth is how we relate to the mother. If the earth does not give us food, we die. If the earth does not give us mother or water, we die. If the temperature isn't ideal, we get sick or we suffer or whatnot. Just like the temperature in the womb, and it's the perfect environment for us in the womb. So the same for the earth. This is the perfect environment for us. We are living in the earth's womb. So that's why I see it as a female. It's just has similarities to how women are. I guess it's the word physiologically. I don't know. I'm tired. Do you believe there was ancient goddess worship? Yes. What were goddess worshiping societies like for men or for women? I actually don't know because I was not there. I don't know. And why is their existence significant to you? Usually, if you're worshiping something, you're going to treat it with reverence. So, for example, sometimes when I think of or when I read about other societies and the deities that they have, like if their deity was a certain animal, I'll think to myself, they probably had some law where you couldn't slaughter this particular animal, or you had a festival for this animal and you held it in reverence. So if you are a woman and you have a society centered around you and your reverence, everything is going to look different. The way the celebration of the cycles of you, like the menstrual cycle would not be seen as dirty or unclean or it's a curse. It would be celebrated. It would be uplifted. If you became a wise old woman and you weren't having any more children, there would be a place for you. The United States is a youth-oriented culture. And I really think that's why it hates women, because they're acting like we are supposed to be 14 years old forever. And I'm sorry, we're not 14 years old forever. I'm sorry. Like if I made it to 30, I'm not 14 anymore. I'm not that child anymore. I'm a woman. Even how they paint the crone, she's seen as like haggard and scary. Is she really haggard and scary? Or are you scared that she sees through your crap? Is that why she's painted like that? Because she's scaring the daylight out of you. Your mama knows. And you're like, how did my mom know? Because she knows you, sir or ma'am. She knows you like the back of her hand. She grew you. Well, some mothers know, but most mothers know. So, yeah, it's a youth-oriented culture. They don't like the changing of women's bodies. They don't want the woman to have any hair. They don't want her to have any wrinkles. They don't want to have any stretch marks. They don't want her to just be tired. They don't want her to not smile. But it's just crazy. But if you were in a society where it was centered around you, I wonder how it would look. But I don't know, because I wasn't there. I've heard of different women-oriented societies, but it just seems like there's so much diversity with them. Like, I've heard of societies where they say the woman would just leave the child with the man, or she would just pass around a man and be like, okay, I got pregnant, now get out of my face. Kind of maybe the closest thing that would be like a woman run society is looking at how bees operate, like the queen bee, and even though they're not people, they're bees, but I don't know. Where does the patriarchy come from? If you hear a banging, it's this raccoon out there. Every night he bangs the trash can. I left him loaves of bread out there, so I shine my flashlight on him. We have a stare down, but not tonight, because I'm busy. Where does the patriarchy come from? How long has it been around? Why did it arise? What are its principal characteristics? I don't know how long it's been around. I don't want to say since the beginning of mankind, because I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know why it arose. I don't even know where it came from. Some people would say the patriarchy came from men. I don't even think it came from men. I think the patriarchy came from either fear, or it came from some type of time period where we needed men to do some type of act or take over for a little while, and then it just got out of control. I don't really know. I'm more leaning on fear that I go back to the whole we came through a woman, this is the only way we could get into this realm. That is actually pretty scary when you think about it. If I did not want humanity to continue if all of us just didn't have any kids within the next 100 to 120 years, or maybe a little bit more, give or take, everyone would be gone. I mean, everyone that wasn't an immortalist or whatever, but everyone would be gone. And that's kind of scary. So if I have that thought in the back of my mind, and I really believe it, then I will start taking actions that will suppress that power. I will make the person that has this power forget the power that they have, and subjugate them and all of that, because I'm afraid they'll get a big head and take it over. Kind of like in the Bible with Pharaoh and the Israelites. It's like, oh my God, they're having so many kids, they're going to take over. It could be an irrational fear. I don't know, because I'm not in that person's mind. I just know it went too far, and the patriarchy, the way it's operating, not only does it hurt women, it also hurts men as well. What are its principal characteristics? When will it end? How will it end? I don't know. I don't know how it will end. I don't know if it'll ever end. I do know one of the characteristics of the patriarchy is it tries to, not only does it try to tell women what to do, it also tells men what to do. And I feel the patriarchy is unfair to men. It doesn't allow men to be human beings. They want men to be all the same. They want the men to be strong warriors, fighting, masculine. Does anybody even know what masculine is? Because what's being promoted as masculine kind of sounds like a serial killer, honestly. Like some incredible Hulk that can't control his temper. But there are men out here that are very gentle. There are some that aren't athletic. They might like ballet. They might like playing the harp. They might like sewing. They might be craftsmen or basketmen. You can't just put them all in one box. And if they don't fit in that box, it's hard. They're seen as like, you're a sissy. You're this, you're that. They don't allow the creative aspect of men. They don't let them cry.
They don't let them feel human needs. They don't let them have vulnerability or anything. And it causes them to suffer. So whatever this patriarchy thing is, it either has to die or it has to change. So everybody can be a human being and be their own unique selves. And maybe that's why in the past there was so I guess so many matriarchies or goddess worshipping societies, because on average, I know women are seen as like, oh, they're merciful, but like if I'm giving birth to humanity and I have all of these children, I'm going to accept that this child has this need, this child has that need. There's a place for all of my children on this planet. And maybe that's why it worked. Do you see feminist spirituality as being incompatible with Judaism and or Christianity? No. I think some women really like structure and some women love tradition, whereas some spiritual feminists will see Judaism and Christianity and all of these other Abrahamic religions as oppressive and demonic. There are other groups of women who feel they can thrive within that belief system. They like the traditions. They like playing the roles that they were taught as they grew up, and it gives them happiness and inspiration. So I think they could strive in feminist spirituality. It would just be in their own unique way. Third group of questions, practices for those practicing in groups. And I'm not going to answer these because I'm not in a group. How often do you meet? Where do you meet? What do you do when you get together? Are there any leaders? What kind of authority do leaders have? Are there any men involved? Do you have an altar? What is on your altar? How do you do any rituals, any kind of prayer, meditation? How do you decide what to incorporate in your practice? Do you think it's problematic to borrow from other cultures or religions? Well, I'll answer that question. I would say yes, if you don't acknowledge where you got it from. Because some things are universal and some things are for specific groups. So when you're doing something with a specific group, you have to tread very carefully. I personally would go to that group and learn about it and ask and get information about it. But then I've also been guilty of that too, because I've borrowed from other cultures. I've borrowed Sanskrit mantras. I've borrowed like Hebrew mantras, candle mat. I've done all sorts of things. I have borrowed. So I am guilty of this too. But you still have to acknowledge where you got it from. How do you feel about secrecy and evangelism in regards to your spirituality? How does your family feel about your involvement in feminist spirituality? Do you practice magic? How do you define it? How do you practice it? How does it work? Can it be abused? Do you believe what you believe because it works or because it's true? One question I can say or answer: how do you practice? Do you practice magic? Can it be abused? Yes. That's mainly the reason I don't join any groups, because some of these groups will be on some psychotic lower level-ish for no reason at all. Like I said, if somebody's threatening your life or threatening the life of your family, or there's something going on where somebody needs to be handled, okay, I could see a group effort with that because you're defending yourself. But if it's just, I'm going to prey on innocent people, that doesn't make any sense to me. All the things you could do in a group, you choose to be petty. You could be using that collective energy to get a bag or something. You could be using it to change the world, but you want to be petty. So if you do form a group, make sure you have the right mindset. Think quality over quantity.
Identity and movement is the next section. Do you call yourself a witch? Why or why not? Are you separatist in your practice? Why or why not? What is women's spirituality, witchcraft, feminist spirituality? Who is included? Who is excluded? How old is the movement? Where does it come from? Is it connected to the New Age movement? If so, how? Why is it happening now? In what sense is it feminist and how important is that? What kind of politics does it support, if any? Does it set particular political agendas? Does it help you reach political goals directly or indirectly? Does it help you reach personal goals? How has feminist spirituality changed or influenced your life? Why is your identification practice important to you? So this is the last round of questions. I'll try to make it quick. Do you call yourself a witch? Why or why not? I do not call myself a witch, mainly because I feel that is a limiting term. As I've gone through just my spiritual journey, I realized that I don't like to be limited. At first I was like, I'm an occultist, but then even that got to be limiting because I am an eclectic person, and I'll go over here, I'll be doing this, I'll be doing that, and sometimes I just take breaks. Sometimes I'll be doing something for a period of time and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. Let's try this. And I'll do that for several months or 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, okay, I'm tired. I'm just going to be regular. I go through phases where I'll do a bunch of spiritual stuff intensely and then I'll just be regular for a year. So right now I'm in my regular phase where I'm really not doing anything because I'm busy and I'm good. As I've gotten older, I just do it on a case-by-case basis. I'm not as consistent as I was in the past, but I still do it occasionally. So I just don't have any terms right now. I just call myself, like my name, who I am, because that's who I am. I just do what I do. And right now, I might chant a little bit for maybe a week or a month, and then I'll take a break because I'm good. Are you separatist in your practice? Why or why not? I am separatist, not only because I don't trust groups, but also because a lot of the people that I've met in spirituality really want you to be consistent. They want you to catch all of the moon phases. They want you to catch all of the ritual days. And sometimes I just don't feel like it. Sometimes I'm like, I don't care if it's a blue moon. I don't care if it's a lunar eclipse. I just want to chill. And I'll catch it next time. And whenever I feel like doing something, I can put myself full throttle. So that's another reason why I'm separatist, because I don't want to always be doing stuff. Like sometimes I'm tired, or sometimes I'm working or reading, or I'm interested in this thing right now and I'll come back to that later. Let's see. What is women's spirituality? I can't even put it underneath an umbrella. It's too vast. Who is included? Who is excluded? It depends on who you ask. Some women will only have women, so that means they'll exclude men. But then other people will include men if the man stays on task or realizes that this is a woman's thing. Then you have different groups that will either exclude or include people. Like, for example, it could be a black group and they just want it for black women and that is what they have. Or it could be an Asian group and they just want it for, well, I know like Asian's not a race, but it's like they just have Asian women. Or it could be a particular belief system where they're like, we are Jewish mystics, and we don't have anything to do with Buddhism. We just have the mysticism of Judaism. It just depends on which group you're talking about. How old is the movement? I don't know. Probably as old as humanity. Where does it come from geographically or culturally? I guess Africa. I don't know. Wherever they found the first skeleton, which was the continent of Africa, I believe, from what I last checked, I guess that's where it started. Is it connected to the New Age movement? No. I think it was before the New Age movement, but it has thrived in the New Age movement. That's one thing. That's why some people think of women's spirituality and they'll automatically think of the New Age movement, because that is the last sect, or that is the last movement where women's spirituality is placed on a pedestal. You're not really going to find it in traditional religions. What kind of politics does it support, if any? Does it set particular political agendas? Once again, it depends on the group you're talking about. So, for example, I have met some spiritual feminists that were very racist, and they would use their magic and their spirituality just to be racist. And then there's others that are moms and they just focus on motherhood, and there's some that are like, they have their own focus. So it really depends on what agenda. Like, are they focused on like Black Lives Matter? Are they focused on LGBTQ? Are they focused on reproductive rights? Or is it all of them? Does it all fall under the umbrella? It could be anything. And how has feminist spirituality changed or influenced your life? I think it's helped me to get through a lot of things. Sometimes I will beat myself up so bad over just life in general. And I feel feminist spirituality gives me some modicum of empowerment and mercy. Or sometimes when I'm struggling, I just think about how this is just a spiritual lesson and I will make it through. And that's what gives me peace. It's also helped me to accept my body. It's helped me to accept my aging process, the uniqueness of me and the uniqueness of others. But yeah, that's all I have to say, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. I do apologize that it was 4 days long and almost 2 hours, but hopefully you learned something and are inspired to read about spiritual feminism. So talk to you later. Bye bye.